Thank you. All right, so welcome everyone to the launch of the Clean Water Act Owner's Manual. We wanted to take some time here today to let you know sort of what's included in the manual, how to use it, some next steps. But before we get going, I want to make some introductions. My name is Colleen Walters. I'm the Delaware River Basin Program Manager for River Network. And I know we're all sort of sitting at our computers at different locations across the country, but do want to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands that we occupy. I'm currently located on the ancestral lands of the Lenni Lenape people, the original caretakers of the Delaware River. And so we'd love to learn more about who's in the room with us today and to virtually say hello to one another. So please feel free to put your names in the chat, your pronouns if you feel comfortable, your organization and where you're calling in from. And if you are unfamiliar with the native lands that you occupy, we do have a link for you to look that up. So please go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat and we can say hello to one another. And so before we get going on the manual, I wanted to pause and give a huge thank you to the amazing team that we have had over the last year to help us come up with this manual that we have for you today. We have a huge team and it was a huge effort. And so want to give big kudos to everyone involved. A big shout out to Gail Killam. I can't see you yet, but if you're on here, please turn your video on if you're able to say hello to everyone. She is the lead author, lead editor, and just the lead behind this manual. She did an incredible job and we want to thank her so much. We've had great contributing editors, designed by Riddle Design Company, an amazing job by Sarah Riddle. River Network staff contributors, Catherine Bear, Amy, and April are on the line with us today. A huge advisory group. So if anyone is on the line that was in the advisory group or the contributing editors, please feel free to turn your camera on. And if we can, I would love if folks are able to unmute yourselves and we can just give a collective clap and woohoos to everyone involved. So if you want to do that real quick, it might be fun. That's awesome. Thank you all so much, Gail. I see you. Hi, Gail. And thank you to our funders, Park Foundation, Water Foundation, Mott Foundation, and NACWA. Could not have done this without their support. So huge thanks all around. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to April Ingle, our policy manager, to talk about what the manual is.
Thanks, Colleen. And I want to give a big shout out, in addition to all of the wonderful people that Colleen just mentioned, I want to give a big shout out to Colleen, who led the development of this manual for the team at River Network. Colleen, we so appreciate you and all the hard work and effort and brilliance that you put into this and everything you do. So thank you so much for all your hard work on this. So to begin, we wanted to just share what the Clean Water Act Owner's Manual is, why we updated it, and what it's for. So the Clean Water Act Owner's Manual is one of River Network's most longstanding resources. We actually released the first edition of the manual in 1999. So yes, back in the 1900s. And a second edition was released in 2005. And the Clean Water Act Owner's Manual is a how-to guide for all of us on how we can use the Clean Water Act to protect and improve the waters in our communities. Over the 20+ years since the first edition was published, thousands of people have used the manual to apply the Clean Water Act to problems that they face in their communities and watersheds. And the manual has helped people all over the United States track and influence and change the way that the law is implemented at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level. And we updated the manual because first, longstanding environmental injustice and inequitable implementation and enforcement of the Clean Water Act needed to be called out and centered in the manual. Also, climate change is increasingly impacting our waters in new and harmful ways. And in each section of the updated manual, we highlighted the ways that the implementation and enforcement of the Clean Water Act can and must improve and respond to environmental injustices and climate change. Also, changes to the rules and regulations and guidance and enforcement of the Act have occurred since 2005, and we wanted and needed to update the manual to reflect those changes also. And finally, who is the Clean Water Act manual, Clean Water Act Owner's Manual for? Our intent is for the manual to be useful for anyone from beginners to experts, including folks who are looking for solutions and actions to take to protect and restore their waterways and their communities and where they live. And for folks that are working on other related issues, such as climate change and access to clean, safe, affordable drinking water in their communities. We know that without community attention, protection, or restoration, without community attention, that the protection or restoration of our local waters, it's not assured. So today, due to the cutting of resources and significant political pressure, Clean Water Act implementation and enforcement actions are often complaint-driven. Concerned individuals are the driving force behind achieving Clean Water Act objectives and goals. And together, we have to continue to build these strong teams of locally involved individuals who are going to continue to track the changes in their water, ask the hard questions, and insist on implementation and enforcement of the Clean Water Act in ways that are just, and ways that advance equity, and that take climate change into account. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Colleen to just walk us through what all is in the Clean Water Act Owner's Manual update. Colleen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, April. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to walk through the different sections that are included in the manual, things to look out for, and sort of how to use the manual. And so here's just a quick snapshot, and I will walk through each of these sections individually. But we start off with featured communities. These are 5 communities that we highlight who are taking the Clean Water Act and using it to advocate for different protections for their waterways. And then we have the Clean Water Act basics, the objectives, goals, and applications of the Act. The problems and strategies for action. These are a list of 13 problems and ways in which the Clean Water Act can be used to help improve those issues. The Clean Water Act programs, this is sort of the bulk of the manual. We'll get into water quality standards, into pollution permitting, and all of the different programs of the Act. And then we'll talk about other federal laws and how other federal laws can work in coordination with the Clean Water Act. And then a bit about some more information, finding more information and resources. And then we have a glossary at the end as well. So before I walk through all of those different sections, here are just some tips and sort of how to use the manual. And, you know, thinking about it as it's a statute, right? It's a law. It's not something that someone would necessarily read from, you know, beginning to end and digest and be able to understand. If you are able to do that, that is amazing. But we felt that, you know, pulling out and highlighting certain pieces and making those connections for you all would help sort of in your advocacy. So we've created this manual in a few different ways and a few different learning styles to highlight important points for you all as you're working through your issues in your own watersheds. So to start, the beginning of the manual starts with centering environmental justice and climate change. And so we have these sort of leading questions, these climate change lenses and environmental justice lenses, these questions to keep in the back of your mind as you are walking through the different program sections. So for centering equity, for example, are the communities most effective, meaningfully involved in the public process? Who's at the table, who's missing from the table, and how can you change that? Questions for climate awareness. Are standards and permits developed with the most current precipitation, stream flow, and temperature data? It's most likely the answer to that is no, but keeping that in your mind as you are reviewing these permits and walking through the permit section is an important lens to remember. So, you know, read through those questions, keep them in the back of your mind as you are walking through the manual. And then we also have these quick reference icons. You'll see on virtually every page of the manual, we'll have an icon or two calling out specific points. So we have a Clean Water Act statute or Clean Water Act regulation icon that is literally just a language text taken directly from the Clean Water Act, so you can see sort of how it's worded in the act itself. Digging deeper, and the 4 more information icons, these provide a little bit more detail on a particular topic, or they link out to resources where you can find more information. The take action icon, it's exactly what it says. It's for you to take action, areas where public involvement and participation, there are opportunities there for you to take action. Featured communities, these are the communities that I mentioned, those 5 communities. They are highlighted throughout the manual, showing the ways that they have used the Clean Water Act. Climate change and centering justice, these are areas in which we are sort of calling out and highlighting the areas that need to address climate change impacts, and areas that are highlighting where injustice has occurred and that justice needs to be considered. And then moving targets, there are some places of the Clean Water Act that are currently in flux. Take the Waters of the United States definition, for example. Instead of sort of giving you updates in the manual itself, because it is a living document, we are referencing the River Network webpage and linking out to different resources that can give you up-to-date information on those certain policies and rulings that are currently up in the air. And so I also just wanted to highlight the manual is formatted as, you know, a car's owner's manual and an auto manual. So there are questions in here that we've anticipated that you might ask yourself. So instead of formatting it in sort of a plain narrative, it's formatted in the form of questions. And as you're reviewing sort of the basics of these different programs, these might be questions that come to mind. So we've sort of anticipated those questions and formatted the language in that way. And then at the end of each section, there are action checklists. These are action items and kind of summarizing what you have learned in that section and creating a form of actions that you'll be able to take given the information that you have just learned. So now I'm going to walk through each of the sections of the manual. So again, like I said, we start with featured communities. We have 5 communities: Southwest Philadelphia, the Gulf South, Northern New Mexico, Northeast Iowa, and the Pacific Northwest. And these featured communities, we introduce the communities, give a little bit of information about them, and then we talk about the problem that they're facing. And then you'll see that we link out to River Network's website that has the longer version of the full story of these communities. And then, like I said, throughout, you'll see those featured community icons where they sort of highlight how these communities have taken action with the Clean Water Act. And then we have the basics, the objectives, the goals, and applications of the Act. If you are a beginner, if you're just coming to the Clean Water Act, this is certainly where you should start. And if you need a refresher, this is a great place to go. We talk about sort of the evolution of the Act, the different goals and objectives of the Act, and how all the programs fit together. And like I said, we also talk about Waters of the United States here. And because of the continuing changes to the ruling, we have created a WOTUS webpage where the latest updates will be held so as to not have to bog down the manual with all those different updates. So here's where you will find kind of the basic information on the Clean Water Act. And then the next section, we talk about problems and strategies for action. There are 13 problems. These are common, typical issues that you might run into in your work. Things like contaminated drinking water sources. We also talk about CSOs and SSOs. We have CAFOs, dams, destruction of wetlands, and a whole long list that's listed in the table of contents. So certainly take a look at that if it relates to any of your work. And so this section has sort of 5 parts. The first is just talking about the problem, introducing the problem, and then links to more information. We don't talk about the problem it's not comprehensive. It's more of an introduction to the problem, but also linking out to other resources if you're interested in learning more. And then we link it to the Clean Water Act and talk about commonly used program areas and where you might be able to move forward with action. And other priority laws that might be connected to the Clean Water Act that you could also use in conjunction with your work, and then agencies and organizations to know. So if you look through that list and you see a problem that you're currently struggling with, certainly locate the page and get some more information. And then we move into the Clean Water Act program areas. So we'll talk first about water quality standards, breaking down the designated uses, water quality criteria, and anti-degradation policies. Talk about those in detail, and then again end with the action checklist about how you can use that information for action. And then moving into permitting pollution. So here we talk about National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, and we get into all of the permits. So we talk about individual and general permits, wastewater, stormwater, municipal, industrial, construction, transportation, all of the good stuff, all of the permits, getting into the nitty-gritty. And then it sort of ends with getting permits right. And so that's how to review a permit, how the public can get involved, what's the public involvement process, when to get involved, who to contact. It is very extensive and very helpful information if you're interested in really diving into the NPDES permit process. And then some of the other Clean Water Act programs that we cover: Section 404, Section 401, state and tribal oversight of federal permits. We talk about the 303D list and total maximum daily loads. Clean Water Act enforcement, so the citizen enforcement actions that you can take. And then we talk about the Section 319, Mountain Point Source Pollution Control and Grants programs. And and the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, the SRF fund that has been, a huge buzz over the last year with the infrastructure funding. We talk about that as well. And then the next section after the Clean Water Act programs, we talk about coordination with other laws. So if you are, say, working on drinking water and looking to understand kind of what connections it might have to the Clean Water Act, you can come here and we have a long list of other laws that have connections to the Clean Water Act. And so if you aren't necessarily involved in, water quality, could be some other, environmental related laws that have connections to the Clean Water Act that you can use to help bolster your work. And then finally, we have finding available data and information. This is where you can go to find additional resources. We have the text of the Clean Water Act here. If you're curious about the condition of particular waterways, How's My Waterway is a fantastic resource. If you're looking for enforcement actions and violations, the ECHO database is a fantastic resource. So take a look at this list here and find some other resources and information and other ways to take action. And so that is the end of sort of the overview of the manual. We hope you dive in. We hope you come back to it often as you have issues, if you have questions, and use it as a resource that you keep coming back to. So here is how to access it, and April will put these links in the chat. So we have a PDF of the manual. We also have the manual on our webpage. We created a landing page for the manual. And the webpage is also a great resource too. That's where, like I said, we have those featured community, the longer stories that you can access there. We have a section called Clean Water Act in the News that's gonna constantly be updated with some any changes that happen, any good news articles that come out, we will keep that there. And like I said, we have the WOTUS webpage as well for updates on that ruling. And now I'm going to pass it over to April to talk a little bit about next steps.
All right. So next steps. the next steps for the Clean Water Act Owner's Manual is really about putting the manual to work. And so what we are planning right now is the next phase of getting the word out to as many people as possible and supporting as many people as possible with using the manual. We'll be working with experts to provide training on using the manual and using the Clean Water Act, and are looking at a variety of options, including webinars and presentations, or a series of presentations for different groups of folks. We're also looking at state-based training on state-specific implementation of the Act, issue-based training on specific concerns such as combined sewer overflows, concentrated animal feeding operations, dam removal, and those type of specific issues. We're looking at doing regional or basin-specific training for a group of folks that work at the regional or basin level, and also looking at local small group training to tackle specific issues and plan for action in communities. And these could be half-day, full-day, or multi-day sessions. But to know exactly the best way to move forward with getting the putting the manual to work is that we would love to hear from you. So Colleen has put a link to a survey in the chat. We would really appreciate getting your input into what you would find valuable and useful in terms of supporting you using this Clean Water Act Owner's Manual. There's a few questions in there asking what type of training you would find particularly useful. There's also, if you want, you can put in your name and contact information, and we can follow up with you directly if there's a specific need that you have, or just a question that you want to ask us about. So please take the survey and tell us what you think. And with that, I think that's the end. We just wanted to do a very quick overview to just let you know what was in the manual. We have about 5 minutes left before we need to wrap up. So we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. We would welcome you to also ask Gail questions. Gail is here. If she'd be willing to come off mute and answer any questions that you might have about the manual, that we'd welcome that as well. Feel free to come off mute, or you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question. And thanks for the comments in the chat. That's great. It's really great to hear that this is a tool that folks need, or finding it well laid out and helpful. That's really great to hear. And we welcome your feedback as well. So as you get in there and start using the manual, if you have feedback for us, we really encourage you to reach out and let us know. All right, well, hearing no questions, I want to just again give a huge thank you to Gail, to Colleen, to the River Network team. Amy's did a great amount of work with the design of the manual, for our advisory committee members, the featured community members in the manual, all the advisors and experts. This was a huge undertaking, and I'm so grateful to everyone who put in all the hard work to make this such a long-standing resource for the community. Colleen, I'll give you the last word.
Thanks, April. Yeah, and just thank you all so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I'll be sure to send around an email with the slides and with all of the links and the link to the survey as well. We do really appreciate just a few minutes of your time to take that survey. And yeah, with that, April, thank you so much, and Gail and Amy and everyone. And we hope you have a great rest of your day celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act.